Welcome back to the ranch, folks. Nate here with Murray Farm and Ranch. For those of you that are new to the channel, I'm Nathan, owner of Murray Farm and Ranch here in southern Oklahoma. I am a physician assistant by training, farmer and rancher by choice. We raise registered Texas Longhorns. One of the first chores we need to do tonight is check on our steers. I just recently weaned a group of steers, and so I've got them up front in our working area, working pens, and I'm going to leave them up here for a couple of days, get them good and weaned, not trying to bust through fences to get back to their mama, and then I will let them out and get them on some good grass. So, well, gotta get some water in that guy. I've got 2 more water troughs over here, so I'm gonna go check them and see if they need water. But these behind me here, let me show you. So right back here, this is a group of steers, and they're gonna go into the beef program for Murray Farm and Ranch. We do raise we raise beef, sell by the quarter, whole, half, delicious grass-fed beef, longhorn beef. It's lean, it's tender, it's amazing, is what it is. It's amazing. And I'll show you guys some of the process that we go through with our steers in later videos, but it's one of the ways that we make an income on the farm, and it's one of the best, actually. There's kind of this food issue. There's a whole lot of issues surrounding the food supply right now, and folks are interested in finding local suppliers that are consistent. These look all right, but I'm going to go ahead and top them off. So, guess what I'm going to use? My new hydrant system that I put in over this spring. We put in about 3/4 of a mile of water line, 7 water hydrants, yeah, love to see that. It makes feeding and watering and rotationally grazing so much easier. But back to what I was talking about. These 2 here, these are a couple of steers. This one, he's right at 1 year old. He's probably, 600 pounds, 700 pounds right now. So we need to get another 300 on him or so. But, so the butcher program, we found that we make a better living by selling beef than we do by selling roping steers, pasture ornament steers, and whatever, what have you. By selling the animal to 2 to 4 families for beef seems to be the ticket for us, and it's providing a product that is really good. This meat is lean. We know exactly what's been put into it. These animals don't get antibiotics just because. We know they're not getting hormones, and they're being fed a grass diet, which is what animals should be being fed. They're getting what they're supposed to be getting. And so I feel very confident that when we send one to market for butcher, that the end product is going to be something we can be proud of. How can I morally send these animals to butcher? And the answer to that is complicated. I don't enjoy that part, but I am not a vegetarian, and I've tried it. I have gone through the kind of the rigors of trying to figure out how to manage protein and so forth through a more vegetarian diet, and I'll be honest, it's just not for me. I enjoy eating meat, but I want to I want to eat meat that I know has been taken care of responsibly. I want to know that it's not been treated poorly. I want to know where it's come from. I want to know what's in it. And I feel as though I would be sort of a hypocrite if I was a meat eater, but I couldn't do the deed myself. And so over time, you know, I kind of wrap my mind around, if I'm going to eat meat, I need to be willing to go through, you know, step A, B, C, D, and handle the process myself. And of course it's hard. You know, when I load a set of steers up to take them to butcher for the first, you know, it's sad. You know, there's a part of me that hurts for them, you know, because I know what's fixing to happen. But then I also know that I'm providing a product that is superior to what you're going to find in your local grocery store. I'm providing families with meat to, you know, sustain themselves, to grow their kids, it's, you know, something that I can be proud to put on their plate, you know. And so I do feel better about it. And over time I've gotten, I don't know if it's calloused or just I'm able to deal with it now. I have learned how to deal, and it's just the way it's going to be for us. You know, that if I'm going to eat meat, I'm going to be the one that's either raising it or harvesting it through hunting and so forth. So to sell beef, you've got two ways. You've got USDA inspected facilities, which are becoming few and far between and difficult to get into. There's long wait times. It's just more difficult. But you can sell by the cut. And so if we butcher something in a USDA inspected facility, I can bring home steaks, hamburger, and sell that by the pound, however I want to whoever I want to, because it's been inspected in the USDA facility. The other way is with what's called custom processors, and custom processors do not, you're not allowed to sell by the cut. And there is kind of a way to, what you do is you sell the animal, and more than one animal or more than one person can go in on partnership on an animal. And so, and what they choose to do with their animal is up to them. And so, for example, a steer, we can sell to two families, and they can choose to have that steer butchered, and then they split the halves. And that is legal to do. And we drop them off at the butcher. They pay the fees. They pay me for the steer, for the purchase of the steer. And they get the cuts however they want. They pick it up, and that animal is theirs. And that is typically what we utilize because there are way more custom shops in Oklahoma. Now, they're still hard to get into. There is still a waiting. You know, like I made the butcher appointments for 3 steers last year and a year in advance. You know, and so if you want to make sure that you have a date, you better be thinking ahead. You better be planning it out. And so I've got, and another thing is it's a good idea to utilize more than one custom shop. Get to know them, know who's in your area, and therefore you have some more options. How do we feed these steers? What do we do to get them to butcher weight? And you know, when I was growing up, my grandfather would raise beef, and the way that they would handle it was they had a really small pen. You know, I mean, it was like probably, 30 feet by 30 feet or something, and that animal would stay in there, and it had access to water and feed. Typically the feed was hay, and they would supplement with grain. And that animal just walked around, barely moved, very small pen. And that was what it did from the time that it went into that pen until it was butchered. And I handle my animals way different. I'm not into pinning them up into a little bitty space. I believe that animals cows, ruminants, were meant to eat browse, grass. You know, I believe that's what their bodies were designed to do. And so I have an area that is our growing pasture, I would say. There's high quality grass on it. And like these steers back here, you can see that they're feeding on some hay. And that's actually, I put that out day before yesterday. And that was a 1,000-pound bale of alfalfa. And so these animals are getting some very high quality hay in addition to grass. And then depending on the preference of who is buying the steer, if they were to say that they would like theirs grain fed, then we'll talk about a 60 or 90 day grain feed out, maybe 120 days. You know, I'll do whatever my customers ask for me to do. If they want 120 days worth of grain feed, we'll do it. If they want it all, if you know the partnership, 4 people say, yeah, we want a steer, but we want him to be grass fed, grass finished. Okay, we'll do it. And so we will put the plans in motion. You know, I'll look at my butcher date, and I'm watching these steers' weights, and you know, I'm trying to get them to that like 900. You know, anywhere from like 850 to 1,000 pounds is kind of the sweet spot for our cattle and the size of our cattle and Texas Longhorn breed. I feel like that works well for us. And so they're typically going to butcher somewhere in the 18 to 24 month range. Animals that are not stressed, they're going to be the ones that put on the weight and give you a good rate of gain. And so I try to keep my animals as stress-free as possible. You know, they're not pushed around into really, conditions that make them upset. You know, we move them from pasture to pasture, which they're very used to. The pasture it's always lush. It's always got a ton of grass. They're not having to scrounge for food. I always try to have a water source close by. I don't want these animals having to walk 3/4 of a mile to go get water. I want them to be able to eat, get water, eat, get water, eat, get water. Another thing that's vitally important is mineral. And I think that's sometimes something that's overlooked, but you know, muscle needs protein. You know, muscle, bone. When you're growing bone and you're growing muscle, you need protein, and you need these essential vitamins and minerals. And so I keep free choice mineral out, salt and trace minerals out 24/7 for our animals. And I believe that keeps them healthier. I think it's kind of like taking a multivitamin in adults. I feel like it helps to protect them against illness. And I believe it gives you a better rate of gain. And that's something else I wanted to touch on is, if like my grandfather did, when they would butcher one cow at a time, and so they would have them pinned up in fairly small confines, and that's probably okay for one animal. But like in my case, I've got 10 in here, and I don't want 10 animals stacked on top of each other, because that's just a good environment to breed some bacteria, some pneumonia, spread some pneumonia, some diarrhea illness, spread parasites. And so I want plenty of space for my animals, and that's part of the reason why I put them on these places that are like 2 to 5 acres, and let them have plenty of room, because they're not walking on top of each other. They've got plenty of grass and access to good clean water. What's my thoughts on leaving them as bulls and taking them for beef versus steering? And if I do steer, do I choose to castrate or band? And here's my theory on it. a couple of guys that have been in this industry a whole lot longer than I have, probably forgot more than I'll ever know, wait a few months before they cut or band. And the reason for it is that they believe that keeping them intact with their testicles obviously has a role in their testosterone production, which they believe has a role in bone formation and creating bone frame. And that frame, the bigger your frame is, the more weight you can put on it. And so what I typically do is I leave them intact for until weaning. And so weaning for us is 7-8 months typically, depending on the conditions and you know, the condition of the mother, the condition of the calf. It's probably somewhere between 6 and 8 months. And so at 6 to 8 months, I will I do a really hard cull, and I'll look at those animals and I'll make up my mind: are they going to be a bull or are they going to be a steer? And if they're going to be a steer, then I start making plans. And the reason why we band is, so as I mentioned, you know, if you keep them intact, you're going to have that testosterone. And when you remove the testicles, you're going to obviously have a decrease in testosterone, which is going to simmer that animal's attitude down a little bit. They're no longer, you know, raging full of, you know, sex hormone. So I feel like they're easier to deal with. I feel like it leaves you with a meat that is less, I don't know, gamey, I guess is the word. I mean, I feel like testosterone plays a role in the taste of the meat. Let's say that you've now decided that you're gonna raise your own beef. You've got a plan set in motion, and you have kind of gone over the positives and negatives, and you've decided you're gonna grain finish the animal. And so a lot of people there's some confusion about that. And if you ask 1,000 different ranchers, you're liable to get 1,000 different answers on how it's done. And I'll tell you what has worked for us and what my customers like. And that's typically a 90 to 120 day feed out. And the way that I start that process is I use a beef starter. And my local ag supply feed store, Frontier Feeds, has a beef starter it's got a mix of some fibrous material. There's some grain in it. There's some alfalfa pellet, I believe, and some cracked corn. And I start by doing a percentage of the body weight, and I'm gonna do some more videos on that. I'll kind of explain that in better detail. But basically, I start at a I start feeding 100% beef starter, and I'm gonna do that for the first 2 to 3 weeks, but I'm gonna increase the amount by a little bit. And then over the last 30 to 45 days, I'm going to start increasing the percentage of cracked corn and less beef starter. And at the very end, it's going to be mostly cracked corn. And that carbohydrate is going to add it's a lot of carbohydrate, so it's going to add some fat. It's going to add some marbling to that meat, some sweetness, what they say. And it's going to put some weight on those animals there at the very end. And the reason why you do that slowly is cattle, they have a stomach that is designed to eat grass. Their rumen is designed to extract nutrients out of grass, to break down cellulose. And if you take a grass animal and all of a sudden you start feeding it corn, it's going to get sick. It's not going to handle that because its stomach doesn't have the bacteria needed to break it down. And if you do that process slowly over a period of weeks, then their body adjusts, and there is they can handle that corn. Now there is there's a lot to be said about grass finishing the animal altogether. Like, I believe that's probably the healthiest option. Grass fed, grass finished. But if you like that, if you know that you want that beef, you want it grain finished, that's how we do it. And I'm going to show you that in better detail in some future videos. All right, so you got that 1,000-pound steer. What does that actually mean as far as meat goes? So 1,000-pound live weight is probably going to mean what's called a hanging weight, or a rail weight, of somewhere in the neighborhood of 650 pounds-ish. And then, so from the rail weight, you've still got bone involved. And so when it goes from the rail to actual butcher cuts, on a 1,000-pound steer, you're looking at probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, 420 to 440 pounds of beef. Some of that's going to depend on what kind of cuts you choose to have. It's going to depend on your butcher and how proficient they are at, getting every little piece, no waste, so, somewhere in that 420 to 440 pound range. And that's going to include, things like brisket, roasts, your steaks, tenderized steaks, hamburger meat. That plays a role also. So your hamburger, the leaner that you make your hamburger, the less of it you're going to have. So if you, say for example, do a 95.5, well, there's 5% fat added back in. So that's not very much fat, and that means that you're going to have a smaller amount of total hamburger meat. But say you do like 80-20, well, now you have 20% added fat in, and so it's going to obviously make more hamburger meat. So things like that are going to affect it as well. But you can count on a 1,000-pound steer somewhere in the neighborhood of 420 pounds of meat plus, and that's going to be, include your steaks, which are going to be T-bones, ribeyes, sirloins, and then hamburger meat roast. You're going to have multiple different kinds of roast: arm roast, rump roast, chuck roast, and you're going to have some ribs, some spare ribs, ground beef, and then some kind of side things are like stew meat and chili meat and stuff like that is also going to be involved. I would highly recommend that you make sure and ask for your marrow bones back. Marrow bones are delicious. They're great sources of healthy fat, and you can cook those down and make bone broth, which adds amazing flavor to so many dishes. Guys, I hope this video answers some of your questions on, what goes into raising a steer for butcher, and why we do what we do. And I hope it sheds a little insight into the process. I mean, I absolutely love these animals, and we want to care for them the best that we can. Back here, we've got a couple that have walked up on near the garden. They're feeding on some good grass back there. But I love these animals. I want them to be cared for, and I don't want them to have any undue stress. And it's the least I can do for an animal that's going to feed our family, feed other families. We're gonna treat them with the utmost respect.